The doorbell rang at 8:17 on a Thursday night. I remember the time because I had just put my daughter to bed. The house was quiet. The dishes were done. Rain was tapping against the windows. And for the first time in months, I thought maybe life was finally starting to feel normal again. Then I heard the bell. One long ring. Not someone pressing it by accident. Not a neighbor. Not a delivery. The kind of ring that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. My husband, Aaron, had been sitting on the couch pretending to watch television. The second the doorbell rang, he went completely still. Not surprised. Not confused. Afraid. That was when I knew. Whatever was standing on the other side of that door had something to do with him. And whatever it was, he had been running from it for a long time. My name is Mia, and this is the story of how my husband lied to me, blamed someone innocent, walked away from the damage he caused, and thought he had escaped the truth. Until the doorbell rang. Welcome back to Calm Verdict Stories. If you enjoy emotional stories about betrayal, family karma, boundaries, justice, and life lessons, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today's story is for anyone who has ever watched someone lie with complete confidence, only to realize that the truth was quietly making its way toward them the entire time. Aaron and I had been married for 7 years. When we met, he was charming in a way that made people feel important. He remembered little details. He asked questions. He made everyone laugh. He knew exactly what to say when someone was nervous, sad, or uncertain. I used to think that made him kind. Later, I realized it made him skilled. There is a difference. Aaron worked as a regional sales manager for a home renovation company. He traveled sometimes, wore nice clothes, and always seemed to know somebody who could make things happen. I worked at a public elementary school as an administrative assistant. My life was less glamorous. I handled parent calls, attendance records, supply orders, and whatever crisis appeared before lunch. We had a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. Sophie was bright, curious, and completely obsessed with drawing animals. Her favorite thing in the world was sitting at the kitchen table with markers, creating pictures of imaginary creatures with wings, stripes, and too many eyes. Aaron adored her. At least, he looked like he did. He took photos of her drawings. He posted birthday messages. He bought her expensive toys whenever he felt guilty about missing a school event. But love is not measured by gifts. Love is measured by presents. And Aaron had started disappearing long before I understood why. At first, it was small things. He would say he had a late meeting. Then he would come home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't his. He would say he went out with clients. Then I would notice charges on our shared account from restaurants he claimed he had never visited. He would say he was too tired to talk. Then I would hear him laughing quietly on the phone in the garage. Every time I asked, he had an answer. Every answer sounded believable on its own. That's how people like Aaron survive for so long. They don't tell one giant lie. They tell hundreds of small lies that fit together just well enough to make you doubt your instincts. But the first real crack came when he lost his job. Or at least, that's what he told me. He came home early one Friday afternoon, dropped his laptop bag by the door, and sat at the kitchen table without taking off his coat. I knew something was wrong immediately. "What happened?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "They let me go." I felt my heart sink. "Why?" He looked up at me. "They said I mishandled a client account. Something about expense records. But it wasn't me, Mia. They're blaming me because I questioned some things." He looked devastated. And I believed him. Of course I did. He was my husband. I hugged him while he cried. I told him we would figure it out. I told him we would cut expenses, use savings, and get through it together. I even called my brother, who worked in finance, to ask if he knew of any openings. For the next 2 months, Aaron acted like he was searching for work. He updated his resume. He took phone calls behind closed doors. He told me he had interviews. But something felt off. He was never anxious the way someone looking for work should be anxious. He wasn't worried about bills. He wasn't worried about Sophie's school expenses. He wasn't worried about the future. Instead, he seemed angry. Angry at the company. Angry at former coworkers. Angry whenever I asked simple questions. Then one evening, while I was folding laundry, Aaron came into the room and said, "My old coworker, Danielle, is spreading lies about me." I looked up. Who's Danielle? She worked in accounting. She made mistakes, and now she's trying to blame me. What kind of mistakes? He sighed loudly. Why does it matter? I already lost my job. I should have paid closer attention to that moment. Not to what he said. To how quickly he became defensive. A week later, I saw Danielle's name on his phone. There were several missed calls. When I asked about it, he told me she was harassing him. He said she was trying to get him to admit something he didn't do. He said she was unstable. Again, I believed him. Because Aaron had spent years building a version of himself in my mind, a good husband, a loving father, a hardworking man who had simply been treated unfairly. And when you believe someone is good, you will work very hard to explain away every sign that they are not. Then the envelope arrived. It came in regular mail. No dramatic return address. No warning. Just a large brown envelope with Aaron's name written on it. He opened it in the kitchen while I was making dinner. I watched his face change. First confusion. Then fear. Then anger. What is it? I asked. He folded the papers too quickly. Nothing. Aaron. He looked at me. Just legal nonsense from the company. What kind of legal nonsense? They're trying to protect themselves. They know they treated me unfairly. Can I see it? His face hardened. No. I had never heard him say no to me like that before. Not firmly. Not without explanation. I stood there holding a wooden spoon over the stove, staring at the man I thought I knew. Then he said, "I'm handling it. Stop making this harder." That night, he slept on the couch. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. But I couldn't let it go. I waited until he took Sophie to the park, then I checked the recycling bin. The envelope was gone. Not thrown away. Gone. That was when I stopped trusting his words and started watching his actions. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I had ignored before. Aaron had a second phone. Not a secret fancy phone. An old cracked phone hidden in a shoebox in the garage. I found it by accident while looking for extra batteries. It was locked. I didn't try to break into it. I didn't need to. The fact that it existed was enough. Then I found a bank statement he had left in the printer. It showed an account I didn't recognize. The balance was almost empty, but there had been several large deposits and withdrawals over the previous year. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that paper until the words blurred. When Aaron came home, I asked him about it. He didn't deny the account. He said it had belonged to his late uncle. He said he was helping manage it. He said the deposits were temporary transfers. He said the withdrawals were complicated. Every answer sounded possible. But none of them felt true. Then I did something I had never done before. I called Danielle. Her number was still on Aaron's missed call list. I sat in my car outside the school after work, hands shaking as I pressed call. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Hi, I said. My name is Mia. I'm Aaron's wife. There was a long silence. Then she said, very quietly, I was wondering when you would call. My stomach dropped. Danielle asked if we could meet somewhere public. We met at a coffee shop the next day. She looked tired. Not dramatic. Not unstable. Not angry in the way Aaron had described. Just exhausted. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were emails, spreadsheets, copies of expense reports, and notes from an internal investigation. I didn't understand every detail. But I understood enough. Aaron had been manipulating sales expense records for over a year. He had been submitting duplicate reimbursements, redirecting approved vendor credits, and using company funds to cover personal spending. When Danielle noticed inconsistencies, she reported them. Aaron found out. And before the investigation was complete, he started telling management that Danielle had made errors. He blamed her. He told people she was confused, careless, and difficult to work with. For a while, it almost worked. Danielle was suspended during the investigation. Her reputation was damaged. She lost sleep, friends, and nearly her career because Aaron had chosen her as the easiest person to blame. But the company eventually found the evidence. Aaron was terminated. Danielle was cleared. And the company had turned the case over to their legal team. I felt sick. Not only because Aaron had lied, but because I had repeated his lies. I had told my brother that Aaron was treated unfairly. I had told friends that his company blamed him for someone else's mistake. I had defended him. Danielle looked at me and said, I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I just thought you deserved to know what he did before he decides to rewrite the story again. I asked her why she had been calling him. She looked down. Because the company has been trying to reach him about repayment. He keeps changing addresses and ignoring notices. They also wanted him to sign documents confirming he understands the investigation findings. Then she added something that changed everything. They believe he moved some of the money through accounts connected to family members. My mind went straight to the unfamiliar bank statement. The account Aaron said belonged to his uncle. The deposits. The withdrawals. The envelope he refused to show me. I drove home in a fog. Aaron was in the kitchen when I walked in. He smiled. Hey. You're home early. I put the folder on the table. His smile disappeared. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, You called Danielle? Yes. His face changed. Not guilt. Anger. You had no right. I laughed once. It wasn't a happy laugh. You had no right to lie to me for months. He started talking quickly. He said Danielle was exaggerating. He said the company had made mistakes too. He said everyone did things with expense reports. He said he planned to pay the money back. He said he was protecting me from stress. Then he said the sentence that finally made me understand him. I did this for us. For us. He had stolen from people who trusted him. He had blamed an innocent woman. He had lied to his employer, his coworkers, his wife, and his daughter. And somehow, in his mind, he was still the victim. I told him to leave. He laughed at first. Then he saw I was serious. He said he had nowhere to go. I said, You should have thought about that before you built a life out of lies. He packed a bag that night. Sophie was staying with my sister, thank God. She didn't see him leave. Aaron stood in the doorway before walking out. He looked at me and said, You're making a mistake. You'll regret taking their side over mine. I looked at him. I'm taking the truth's side. Then I closed the door. For 3 weeks, I heard almost nothing from him. He sent messages saying he was sorry. Then messages saying I had overreacted. Then messages saying Danielle had manipulated me. Then messages saying he missed Sophie. Then messages saying I was destroying our family. I didn't respond. I spoke to a lawyer. I changed the locks. I separated our finances. I started the process of protecting myself and my daughter. It was exhausting. It was terrifying. But every day without Aaron in the house felt a little quieter. A little safer. Then came that Thursday night. The doorbell rang at 8:17. Sophie was asleep upstairs. Aaron had come over earlier that evening because he wanted to talk about visitation. I had agreed to let him sit in the living room for 15 minutes while Sophie colored at the kitchen table. He looked different. Tired. Thinner. More nervous than I had ever seen him. He kept checking his phone. He kept looking toward the front window. When the doorbell rang, he stood up so fast that he knocked over his glass of water. I looked at him. "Aaron?" He whispered, "Don't answer it." That was when I knew. I walked to the door. He grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to leave a mark. But hard enough that Sophie looked up from the kitchen table. "Mom?" I pulled away from him. "Do not touch me." He let go immediately. Then he said, "Please. Just don't open the door." The bell rang again. I looked through the peephole. 2 people were standing outside. One was a woman in a dark coat holding a folder. The other was a man with a badge clipped to his belt. I opened the door. The woman introduced herself as an investigator working with Aaron's former employer's legal counsel. The man beside her was there to document the service of official papers. Aaron stood behind me, silent. The investigator explained that Aaron had repeatedly ignored requests related to the company's financial review. They had reason to believe he had withheld information about funds and accounts connected to the case. Then she looked directly at him. "Aaron, we need you to acknowledge receipt." He said nothing. The man with the badge stepped forward. "You've been served." The papers were placed in his hands. Aaron's face went pale. Sophie was still standing in the kitchen doorway, watching. I immediately walked over to her. "It's okay," I said softly. "Go upstairs and pick a movie, sweetheart." She looked at Aaron. "Is Daddy in trouble?" Aaron looked away. I knelt beside her. "Daddy made some choices that adults need to handle. You're safe." She nodded slowly and went upstairs. When I stood back up, Aaron was staring at the papers. For months, he had convinced himself he could outrun everything. He had ignored calls. He had changed addresses. He had lied to me. He had blamed Danielle. He had hoped that if he acted confident enough, the truth would get tired and go away. But truth does not get tired. It waits. And eventually, it rings your doorbell. The investigator asked if I had any knowledge of the accounts. I told her the truth. I told her what I knew. I told her what I had found. I told her that I had already spoken to my lawyer and was willing to cooperate fully. Aaron looked at me like I had betrayed him. But I hadn't. He had betrayed all of us. The investigator nodded and said someone would contact me later. Then she and the man left. The rain was still falling. The porch light reflected off the wet pavement. Aaron stood in my living room holding the papers, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Not because someone had finally caught him, but because there was no one left for him to blame. He tried one more time. "Mia," he said, "you don't understand. They're going to ruin me." I looked at him. "No, Aaron. You ruined yourself." He sat down on the couch. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered Danielle sitting across from me in that coffee shop, exhausted because Aaron had tried to destroy her career. I remembered the money missing from our life. I remembered the lies. I remembered Sophie asking whether her father was in trouble. And I realized that feeling sorry for someone does not mean you have to save them from the consequences of what they did. Aaron left 10 minutes later. This time, he didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He didn't blame me. He just walked out into the rain. The legal process took time. I won't pretend it was easy. There were meetings, documents, phone calls, and days when I wished I could wake up and discover that none of it had happened. But slowly, the truth came out. Danielle's name was cleared completely. She received a formal apology from the company and was promoted to a role she had earned long before Aaron tried to destroy her. The company recovered part of what Aaron had taken. Not all of it. But enough to close the investigation. Aaron accepted responsibility in the end. Not because he suddenly became honest. But because the evidence gave him nowhere left to hide. Our divorce was finalized a year later. We arranged a structured visitation plan for Sophie that kept her safe and protected her from adult problems. Aaron had to rebuild his life slowly. And maybe that was the first honest thing he had done in years. As for me, I stayed at the school. I kept my small house. I learned how to manage everything on my own. I learned that peace can feel unfamiliar when you have spent years living around someone else's chaos. I learned that trust should not mean ignoring your instincts. And I learned that the truth does not need you to scream for it. It does not need you to chase it. It does not need you to prove it to people who are determined not to see it. Sometimes, all you need to do is step aside and let it arrive. For Aaron, it arrived at 8:17 on a rainy Thursday night. It arrived with a doorbell. And it changed everything. Thank you for watching Calm Verdict Stories. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was lying? And how did you handle the truth when it finally came out? Subscribe for more stories about betrayal, karma, boundaries, justice, personal growth, and life lessons. Until next time, stay calm, stay strong, and remember, the truth always finds its way home.